Well, hello, everybody. Long time to not be in your ears. I think Eleanor and I were last here when the Ukraine war broke out. So we were going to talk about that. So that was about a year and a half ago. Life gets in the way, things happen and change. Being a PhD student and an adult working full time, this kind of fell through the cracks. But I am lucky enough to be a co-convener of the Northwest Medieval Studies Network through my University of Manchester with other schools in the Northwest of England. And I'm a co-convener with Anna Probert, who is at the University of Liverpool. And we got funding to be able to, have in-person meetings and other things for the postgraduate in the group network, the NWMSN. And so we decided to have that adopt modern medieval and make it a postgraduate podcast. So now we're modern medieval, either postgraduate podcast or a NWMSN postgraduate podcast. We'll figure it out. But yeah, so we're here back in your ears. Hooray! For those of you who don't remember, I am Meaghan, and I am at the University of Manchester doing my PhD in English literature and American studies with an emphasis on medieval studies and medievalism. I'm the one that studies all things Buffy, and it is now Buffy in Blood. And I have about a year and a half left. It's very exciting, very stressful, all the things that are great and wonderful. But enough of just me talking. I'm going to introduce Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
So yeah, welcome. This is exciting. We're finally doing it after talking about it. As I mentioned, Anna's a co-convener with me. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or if it feels self-explanatory, kind of what we do.
Yeah, we just co-run the postgraduate reading group.
Mm-hmm.
So we get together about once a month with the postgrads to discuss various aspects of our research, really. Whatever happens to be most interesting to someone that month.
Yeah, and we're here to really kind of foster community, buzzwords, but it's very casual going, and we're hoping to have our fellow members, participants, colleagues, what we'll call them, coming here and talking and sharing their research or things that just interest them. So in the modern medieval tradition of keeping it accessible and mellow, but also hopefully learning something new. So Anna, why don't you give us a little blurb of who you are?
So I'm Anna. I'm a PhD student at the University of Liverpool in the English department, studying medieval chronicles more generally. But I'm also interested in things like just medieval chronicles more generally, medieval book culture, but also medieval drama and costuming in medieval drama as well. Just because why have, one interest when you can have five?
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. And for those of us who maybe aren't as involved in book culture or whatnot, what exactly is a medieval chronicle?
So it's basically a medieval history book with varying levels of accuracy and believability, I must say. You'll get many a medieval chronicle that will start with these mythical foundings of Britain and King Arthur stories. My research focuses on a specific chronicle, which goes from Alfred to King Alfred in about, I'm going to get this date wrong, 860 something, to Henry V, so in about 1418-ish. So he does swerve a lot of the more fantastical elements.
Still a long span of time.
A long time. It's a long time, and it's a long book. Too long to do a whole PhD on, in fact. But I'm trying.
Yeah, Anna's shown some images. She has special access to this chronicle, and the handwriting she does. Is it paleography? Is that the name of the studying?
Yeah, paleography literally means study of old handwriting.
I was like, oh no, that's about dinosaurs, but it's not. That's
paleontology.
Paleontology, yeah. So paleography, study of handwriting, yeah. Which I do not have that skill. And kudos to you seeing the things you've attempted at least to decipher, if not always 100% successfully.
When it's in Latin that you've got to watch out.
Oh gosh.
That's when things get very dodgy on my end.
I would just give up, honestly. But that's amazing. And so very, very, I think very interesting. Other people think Anna's research interesting too, because she is funded, and it's through her funding that we are here. So
yeah, I do have to say a big thank you to it's the AHRC, it's the Arts and Humanities Research Council, for funding literally everything I do at the moment.
yes, thank you, AHRC. So very cool. So you've told us a little bit about who you are and your research. So how did you kind of come into the medieval as a whole, but also what you study or have studied? Because your master's was a bit different. That was more like
Yeah.
the costumes and theater, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So origin story.
Origin story. It's a very long origin story, so I apologize. Medieval, I've always been like a bit of a nerd, and I've always liked medieval history and like fantasy books, like Tolkien is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hadn't consciously gone, yes, medieval literature until second year of university, and I did a medieval literature module.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, this is the best thing ever. So then I started on in my master's, I was looking at medieval drama because I love medieval drama. It's just so delightfully weird. And I was looking more specifically at clothing and costuming. And then we got on to, well, are you interested in a PhD? What would you want to do it on? And I love paleography, and I'd done paleography training as part of my master's. And I was like, I really want to use that. And I'd been a research assistant to my supervisor, and she works on medieval chronicles. And I found those really interesting because it's really fun to see the perspective of medieval history from a medieval person.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and it's, you know, even stuff that like Edward I is history to someone in the 15th century in the same way it is history to someone in the 21st, or even like King Alfred. All of these things, they think of it in not quite the same way, but sometimes they are. And I found the whole thing fascinating. So I was like, what can I do with these disparate interests to sort of bring them together into one PhD project? And we came up with what I do, which is I'm trying to create a partial edition of this specific chronicle that has never been fully published.
Yeah, I hit a gold mine with that. I love it when you try to like combine your interests or find something that falls within your interests and make it worthwhile to an institution to have you. And it's like amazing that you're also, going to be, working on this partial edition. So it's like, that it's going to be out there when you finish.
Well, that's the thing. And I've like, obviously since starting my PhD, and you do loads of reading, and I come across these references to this chronicle because people have been like aware that it exists. Obviously, It's not hiding. It's in a private collection. It's not published, so it's not easily accessible. So a lot of people sort of go, oh, this guy exists or this chronicle exists. We don't really know much about it. Moving on. Yeah. So it's really fun to be able to be like, I know, let me tell you.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so we have a symposium or a conference, whatever you want to call it, every summer through this group. And it's usually quite small and intimate. We're trying to make it a little bit bigger, but it is nice that we can be friends and support one another. But Anna presented on her research a bit more to our group this year. And it was so interesting, like how you were talking about it and your particular chronicler, like doing his own kind of edit notes where he's like, actually, this one says this. And like you said, the perspectives of history, because we think, oh, that was just a long time ago. So whatever. But like you were saying, how they kind of conceptualize what was and is historical similarly, but then again, because it's medieval, just different worldview perspectives. The same way we look at, I don't know, as an American, the Civil War, or in England, the Victorian era or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, really interesting. Kudos to you. Good for you. Good origin story. Not very long, despite saying it was going to be a long.
It was a multi-part origin story.
It was a multi-part. It's always reassuring to hear for anyone who has like listened to this podcast and heard my origin story many a time. But how I didn't come to the medieval really until my second master's at UCL, because I'm a nerd. And that was funneled through Buffy in a way. I mean, the course with Robert Mills at UCL was just phenomenal in and of itself. But kind of coming to it a bit later, because I feel like growing up, there were people who were like really into the medieval from the get-go. And I was never one of those. And I avoided a lot of medieval literature and things, kind of like the plague, if you will, aside from, of course, like Lord of the Rings or anything medieval fantasy and that kind of medievalism.
Yeah. I mean, I'd never read medieval literature until I got to university. I'd been a history nerd, so my undergrad degree was in English and history. And I liked Tudor history because there was a lot more easily accessible sort of popular history, so it was a lot more readable to someone who was younger, Tudor history than there was medieval stuff. But then I'd always sort of been interested in medieval history, but it was only really when I got to uni that I started reading medieval literature and was like, this is so good.
Yeah. I remember in high school, because I took a course on satire and whatnot. So we read The Miller's Tale, I think it is, from Chaucer, the one where the guy sticks his butt out the window and the lady does. We read that. And I thought it was interesting because we went kind of from ancient Greece through till today. And then when I was at community college, I as part of the American core curriculum, if you're in English literature, you have to take a medieval course. It's essential. So I was in a Chaucer class, but it was on Wednesdays, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So, you had a 15-minute break in the middle. And I just, as a 20-year-old or whatnot, better things to do with my life than that. So I feel bad because I always just dipped out of class during the break and went home. I think maybe it was medieval literature and Chaucer, the emphases. And I enjoyed it, but it still wasn't that aha. And then when I went to Berkeley, because I had taken that course, I didn't have to touch medieval literature.
Yeah.
So I was success. So it's kind of funny that I've avoided all these things until now. Yeah, it's also funny, as you were saying, with the Tudors. I mean, especially today, there is just such a fascination still, right, in pop culture, especially with Henry VIII. Elizabeth
just,
the First.
It's hugely recognizable. It's a lot more accessible. The language is more accessible. There are more sources. There's 1,000 reasons why there is more of that available to someone. Yeah. I think that is sort of shifting a bit. You've got things I forgot what it's called. The White Queen. There was some TV show that was about the Wars of the Roses. I can't remember what it's called now.
There's been quite a few. Yeah. The White Queen might have been about Catherine of Aragon or something like that. Oh. I know what you're talking. There's been lots of things, and things called War of the Roses. We had Pillars of the Earth in 2010 based off the Bullet book. So it is coming. We're also seeing just kind of a medieval revival in a weird way. This is kind of a side project that I'm hoping to pursue post PhD, but especially in regards to how women are in pop culture, but hagiolatry, the study of saints and depicting women as such. So halos and movies and wings and the Halsey, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, that album cover is based off of a medieval painting. So it's really interesting. Yeah, the medieval is still such a weird, I still read things written in the last 5 years by really well-known scholars of the early modern or something. And they still go oh, but that's medieval torture, or that's the Dark Ages. And I'm how is this still?
Yeah. I mean, so one of the reasons I didn't read medieval literature, well, there was a lot of reasons. It wasn't an assigned text in school or anything, but I sort of had it in my head that it was quite simplistic and boring. And the first lesson, I was oh my God, there is so much here. It is not
dull or
it's not
simplistic.
Yeah, I mean, because people talk about Chaucer as the father of English literature, which you could debate about, but sort of meaning he's sort of one of the earliest and one of the most popular earliest people of literature in English. But that doesn't mean that the literature being produced was simplistic or just sort of figuring itself out in any way. You can read the Canterbury Tales, which are quite short text, but there's such richness in them.
Yeah.
And I was sort of astounded at how interesting the characters were in such short text and how much sort of nuance you could get in them when I was really expecting quite simplistic archetypes.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, then you have the antithesis kind of to that, where you have Beowulf, right? Which is early medieval. Some people
Which sort of gives the lie to Chaucer being the start of English literature, obviously, but that's a different debate.
Exactly. And in high school, my sophomore year of high school, we were supposed to read Beowulf, and then I think Sir Gawain the Green Knight, but an abridged or whatever version.
Yeah, I would not assign that to a high schooler.
No, well,
with
Beowulf,
all the love in my heart.
I did not. I think I read the first 500 lines and I went, nope. And I remember having a test on it, and I just didn't do that well, but I teach a course now, or I'm a TA for at Manchester. It's a mandatory first year course called Mapping the Medieval. And we just do 2 texts. We do Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf, which is fantastic.
I love that translation.
It's so fascinating because since he knew the knows Irish, the Gaelic language, which has lots of roots in, it's got some similarities to the early medieval English and that. And so he was very aware of that. And his translator's note is just fascinating, and how he really paid attention to the meter and how the poem is formatted, which is fascinating. It's like ring cycle and got kennings and all these other fascinating things. And this is written in what, like the 8th century, 8th to 9th. We're not really 100% sure, but it is so complex and beautiful. And yeah, I'm like, this is, because it's also, you think something like Homer, right? The Iliad and the Odyssey, and you're taught that from a young age, knowing that, oh, this was an oral tradition that was then written down. But it's the exact same with Beowulf.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because it's not ancient Greece or something, it like kind of falls, everyone knows of it, but they don't know about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is actually very accessible because it's written in Middle English. So you can either get into the rhythm of that quite quickly, or it's very easy to get a translation. Ours is a side-by-side. So one side is in the original Middle English, and the other side is the modern English translation.
Yeah, I would like put a disclaimer for anyone new to Middle English is I would not start with Gawain without a side-by-side translation, because it is a Northwest dialect.
Yeah,
and our modern English derives from a London dialect of Middle English. It can be a bit more difficult to get your eye into and get the rhythm of, as opposed to Chaucer, which is just that little bit closer to modern English, considering they were written roughly in the same time.
A very good point.
But I love Gawain so much.
It is such a weird, fun text, and I love teaching it because of the, recent film that came out a few years ago, and talking about adaptation and translation and kind of thinking through that film, because it's so weird and it captures the kind of eerie, bizarre atmosphere, but then it also has its own additions to the story and everything and what it emphasizes. And I mean, it is very art housey, I guess you would say, but all the medievalists that I know, even if as a whole they may not agree with the film, they're like, but the costuming and the feel of it and everything was
I think I'm on that.
Ello and I, before the podcast went on its very long hibernation, if you will, talked about the original Gawain text in one episode, and then the film afterwards. So if anyone's interested on hearing thoughts of Meaghan long ago and old host, but yeah, just kind of the nuances between. But yeah, the medieval, it's not a dark age. So if you see that, smite them. It's not true. I don't know. So yeah, this is just meant to be a bit of a brief hello, welcome, everyone listening, and also very excited to have Anna be my new co-host. Do you have any final kind of thoughts or suggestions, tidbits, Anna, that you would like to share?
I've been completely blank. No, I think we've said everything.
Okay. Bringing one final kind of tidbit back from the days of yore of this podcast, I'm going to ask you, Anna, what is your favorite kind of medieval fact or tidbit? It could be an item or a text. People love to say like bestiaries or marginalia. It could be more specific.
Kind of weird. I love when you get these sort of flashes of humanity from it, because I think that's one of the issues is we sort of see this as a sort of long ago thing where we don't really see them as real people. So like just bouncing off when I look at text really closely, and sometimes you could just see the sort of humanity of it in things like when they make a mistake and they have to cross it out, or they might write something next to it. I love that sort of thing. I'm trying to think of a specific example that sums this up.
No, I mean, that's great because you work with, old texts that obviously this is pre-printing press, so it's all handwritten. You are physically and materially engaging with
well,
mementos.
Here's an example. One time I was looking at a text, it was in verse, it was a chronicle. So this wasn't them composing it, this was them copying it out to create another version of it, another copy. And the guy had made like a mistake in every line, like of the first 4 lines. And it got to the point where he just crossed out all 4 lines and started again. And he made another mistake. And I was just like, oh, this poor scribe. And it was just this little flash of humanity in a manuscript that I just love.
No, that's actually wonderful, especially because when we go to museums or galleries or archives that are displaying medieval texts or, Bibles and such, it's always the beautiful, perfect page. Usually maybe there's a minor cross out, but to know, they did make mistakes and it was a stressful job. And so, we've all been there, handwriting for tests in school and you had to use pen and you have sentences crossed out and you're like, don't read this or something like that. So that's great. Thank you so much, Anna. I'm glad to go on this journey with you.
Thank you for inviting me on to join.
Woo woo. And hopefully we will have some of our fellow postgraduate reading group peers in your ears. I didn't mean to make that rhyme. So I'll just talk about poetry. So until next time, I'm Meaghan.
I'm Anna.
Thanks. Bye.